Have you ever wondered if the history you know about who was the first prophet before Moses truly reflects the whole truth? Leave us your comment and tell us if you've ever felt that something didn't quite fit in the narrative we were told as children. Today, we're going to dive into a mystery that challenges centuries of interpretation and could forever change the way you understand the scriptures and the very beginning of humanity. Because what if I told you that before Moses there was another prophet, one who, though forgotten by most, left a silent echo in the history of creation and in the oral traditions that ancient priests feared to share? A name veiled in the shadows, waiting to be revealed to those who have ears to hear. Do you believe that the history of humanity still hides untold secrets? We want to hear your voice and your thoughts. Leave your comment and tell us, what do you think about these mysteries that connect us to the heavens? As we delve into the ancient pages of the Torah and trace the roots of prophecy, we encounter a whisper that crosses through time, that of a man who walked with God before the law was given to Moses. A man whose testimony, though shrouded in the veil of tradition and interpretation, challenges our understanding of who truly was the first prophet and what his role was in the drama of creation. For we cannot forget that the book of Genesis not only speaks to us of the creation of the world and the fall of man, but also offers glimpses of those who, in the midst of a corrupt and desolate world, dared to raise their voice to proclaim divine truth. In the account of creation, after Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, humanity began to multiply and fill the earth. But with the increase of generations came also the increase of wickedness, and the heart of man turned toward corruption and violence. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, a name shines with a special radiance: Enoch. Genesis 5:24 tells us, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." This phrase, so brief and so laden with mystery, opens a door to the unknown. Who was Enoch? Why was he taken? Was he perhaps a prophet before Moses? And what if his life holds the true beginning of prophecy and of divine dialogue with man? In Jewish tradition, Enoch is not only remembered as a righteous man, but also as a prophet and seer. The apocryphal Book of Enoch, a text that, though not canonical, was deeply respected and studied by early Jewish and Christian communities, describes Enoch as someone who received heavenly visions and divine secrets. In the Book of Enoch, 1 Enoch 1:2, we read, "Enoch, a righteous man, whose words were given to the generations of the earth, and was a man blessed and righteous in the eyes of God, and who saw the visions of the Holy One and of heaven." These words reveal that Enoch was no mere mortal, but a messenger, an intermediary between heaven and earth, a prophet who walked with God before Moses received the tablets of the law on Mount Sinai. If we analyze the original Hebrew text, the word used to describe Enoch's relationship with God is Hayel-Kh, Halak, which means to walk, but also implies a deep intimacy, a constant walking in communion with the Most High. This walking, more than a mere physical movement, is a metaphor for the spiritual life that Enoch led. He walked in obedience, in revelation, in deep communion with the divine, and in that walking, he received visions that made him the first silent prophet, the forgotten herald of a covenant not yet written in stone. His life became a sacred dance with the mystery, a manifestation of faith that defied the darkness surrounding his contemporaries. St. Augustine, in his commentaries on Genesis, mentions that Enoch was the precursor of those who would ascend to the presence of God without passing through death, a figure of the heavenly promise reserved for the righteous. Origen, for his part, holds that Enoch was a living testimony to the possibility of a personal and transformative relationship with God before the mediation of Moses and the law. Both church fathers, though writing centuries later, perceived in Enoch the spark of prophecy and intimacy with the Most High, a whisper that still resonates in the sacred pages for those who dare to listen. Can we then consider Enoch as the first prophet before Moses? The answer, though veiled, seems to lean toward yes. Enoch was the first to be taken by God, the first to receive heavenly visions according to apocryphal traditions, the first to walk with God in a world already acquainted with the weight of sin and corruption. It was he who, in the silence of ancient days, raised his voice to proclaim divine justice and warn his contemporaries of the coming judgment. For if we read in the book of Jude in the New Testament, Jude 1:14-15, we find a direct reference to Enoch as a prophet. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all." Here, the New Testament confirms what ancient traditions held. Enoch was a prophet, one who spoke of judgment and the coming of the Lord, long before Moses ascended Mount Sinai. But why then was his figure relegated to the shadows of history? Why don't we read more about him in the canonical text? Perhaps because Enoch represents a spirituality that did not fit the narrative of the Mosaic law. His intimate walk with God, without mediators, without a temple, without ritual sacrifices, symbolizes a direct and personal relationship with the Creator, something that might have been seen as a threat by the religious institutions that developed later. His story, therefore, becomes a reminder that prophecy and communion with God are not limited to human structures, but can manifest in any heart willing to walk with Him. And if we delve even deeper, we discover that Enoch was not only a prophet who spoke words of judgment and hope, but also a symbol of the reconciliation of man with the divine. His visions, narrated in the Book of Enoch, transport us to heavenly realms where fallen angels receive judgment, where the secrets of the cosmos are revealed, and where the voice of God resonates like an eternal song. Enoch thus becomes a mirror reflecting humanity's longing for the transcendent, a reminder that at the heart of creation lies a call that can only be heard by those who walk in humility and awe. In Enoch's voice, we find the root of prophecy, a root that sinks its depths into creation itself and rises like a tree of justice and truth. His story invites us to look beyond the rigid structures of religion and to open our hearts to the possibility of a revelation that transcends time and human words. For in the end, what Enoch embodies is the eternal dance between the human and the divine, the whisper of the Spirit that continues to call each generation to awaken and walk with God. When we contemplate the figure of Enoch and immerse ourselves in the folds of his story, we perceive a glimmer of the divine presence that precedes even the written law, a glimmer that speaks to us of a communion with God that needed no human mediators or codified rituals. And it is precisely in that detail where we find the essence of primordial prophecy, a direct, intimate, and transformative experience with the Creator, springing from the deepest part of the human heart and expressed in words of life and judgment, of warning and hope. Enoch shows us that the dialogue with God is not a privilege reserved for great patriarchs or renowned prophets, but a whisper that can arise in the silence of a soul willing to listen. The Book of Enoch offers us visions of heavenly dimensions, of fallen angels, and of the spiritual battle waged beyond the visible. It speaks of the Watchers, the angels who descended to earth and took human wives, and of how Enoch was chosen to intercede for them before the throne of God. This episode, though part of the apocryphal tradition, reveals an essential aspect of the prophetic function, to be a bridge between the divine and the human, a voice crying out in the midst of injustice and chaos. Enoch thus becomes a messenger who not only observes but also intercedes, carrying in his heart the burden of humanity and the fallen angels, reminding us that prophecy is not only about announcing judgment, but also about offering the possibility of redemption. In the book of Genesis, the silence surrounding Enoch contrasts with the resonant echo of his story in extra-canonical texts. It is as if Scripture, by mentioning his walk with God and his mysterious disappearance, invites us to look beyond the written words, to read between the lines and discover the depth of his relationship with the Most High. For what Enoch lived cannot be reduced to a simple biographical account. His story is a portal that connects us with the mystery of divine communion that precedes all religious structure. His life teaches us that the true prophet not only speaks on behalf of God, but lives in intimate communion with him, walking hand in hand with the Spirit in every step he takes. Jewish tradition, especially in the Talmud and the Midrash, captures echoes of Enoch as a man of wisdom and revelation. It is said that Enoch taught his contemporaries the secrets of heaven and earth, and that he was the first to transmit to humanity the knowledge of the celestial spheres and the laws governing the universe. Although these texts are not part of the official canon, their existence reminds us that, in the history of faith, there are voices that resonate on the periphery, voices that, though silenced by institutions, continue to whisper truths that defy the passage of time. Enoch, in this sense, represents that voice rising from the shadows, that spark igniting the fire of spiritual searching beyond established boundaries. In the Gospel of Luke 3:37, when the genealogy of Jesus is described, Enoch is mentioned as part of the lineage connecting fallen humanity with the promise of redemption. This detail, seemingly small, holds profound symbolism. Enoch is not an isolated figure, but a link in the chain, uniting the past with the future, creation with redemption. His life teaches us that every generation is called to take up the golden thread of faith and walk with God, as Enoch did. For in his walking, we discover that true prophecy is not measured by the number of words spoken, but by closeness to the heart of God. As we reflect on the figure of Enoch, questions arise that touch the most sensitive fibers of our spirituality. Are we willing to walk with God, even if it leads us down solitary paths? Can we, like Enoch, hear God's voice amid the noise of the world and dare to proclaim his truth, even if it costs us the misunderstanding of others? Are we prepared to embrace a relationship so intimate with the Creator that he himself takes us into his presence, as happened with Enoch? These questions do not seek quick or easy answers. They are invitations to a deep search, an inner journey that challenges us to live our faith authentically and without compromise. In the letter to the Hebrews 11:5, the author states, "By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God." This testimony not only confirms Enoch's uniqueness, but also shows us the foundation of all prophecy, faith. For without faith, it is impossible to please God, and without faith, the prophetic voice becomes an empty echo. Enoch teaches us that true prophecy arises from a heart that trusts, that walks with God, that fears neither judgment nor solitude, because it knows its dwelling is in the presence of the Most High. And if we look beyond the biblical text and immerse ourselves in the mystical currents of Judaism, we discover that Enoch was identified with the angel Metatron, the angel of the presence, the celestial scribe who records the deeds of men. In the Zohar and other Kabbalistic texts, Metatron is seen as the intermediary between God and humanity, the guardian of celestial secrets and the guide of righteous souls. This identification of Enoch with Metatron offers us an even deeper vision of his role as a prophet. He not only spoke on behalf of God, but was transformed into a celestial being, a living bridge between heaven and earth. His ascent symbolizes the possibility of humanity to rise, to transcend the flesh and embrace the divine light. This connection between Enoch and Metatron reminds us that prophecy is not merely a gift granted to a few chosen ones, but a universal call to all who long to walk with God. For ultimately, each of us is called to be a prophet in our own life, to be a voice of justice, a messenger of hope, and to reflect the divine light in a world thirsting for truth. Enoch teaches us that prophecy begins in the heart, in that secret space where the voice of God whispers to our soul, "Walk with me." And that call, though personal, has the power to transform the world. Thus, as we contemplate Enoch as the first prophet before Moses, we discover not only a historical figure, but a spiritual archetype that challenges us to rediscover the true meaning of prophecy. He invites us to break free from rigid structures and open our hearts to the mystery, to dare to walk with God in silence and solitude, trusting that He will reveal His secrets at the precise moment. For as Enoch teaches us, prophecy is not just words, but life, not just proclamation, but transformation. And in that journey, we discover that the voice of God does not always resound in the roar of thunder or the blazing fire, but often manifests in the whisper of a gentle breeze, in the silence of the soul that seeks, in the daily walk with the Creator. Enoch reminds us that this whisper is still alive today, waiting for us to hear and follow it, as he did. Are you willing to walk with God as Enoch did? Are you ready to discover the prophet within you? Thus, as we contemplate the figure of Enoch as the first prophet before Moses, we discover that the path of faith is not a rigid structure, but a dance between man and the divine. His story invites us to look inward, to discover that each of us carries within the spark of prophecy. For like Enoch, we are called to walk with God, to listen to His voice in the silence, and to proclaim His truth with courage. What do you think about this mystery? We want to hear your reflection.